to Charmed Life, a radio show discussing spirituality, magic, and the unconditional love of the universe. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm your host, Tricia Carr. Thank you for being here with me today. What a gorgeous day it is where I am. And I wish that gorgeous experience into your life in this moment, whenever, however you are joining me today. And I would like to remind you how you can join me on YouTube. That is youtube.com/Tricia Carr. We live stream this broadcast every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific. You can actually join us, watch. You can communicate on the comment stream with other people. You can sometimes probably see trolls on there. You can just love them. Just love the trolls. They're just showing you the places where they need some extra love. And that's why you're here, is because you want some love and you want to shine that love into the universe. So thank you so much for your work. And also you can listen to us, all the archives on iTunes, iHeartRadio, any way that you get your podcast. I would love to encourage you to like, subscribe, share, comment, and because that will just add to that thing called an algorithm, which is really just a model of the non-physical experience of combining our light, which expands exponentially when we do that. So thank you so much for co-creating this experience with me. I want to share with you also that I do have workshops coming up every month. The one that is coming up this month, which is April of 2019, it is on connecting with the multidimensionality of your spirit guide team. So this is an experience of journeying as well as lecture and question and answer. You can join me live in my studio in Los Angeles, specifically Burbank, California, or you can live stream it. So go check it out on my website, just TriciaCarrCharm.com. And if you go to Mystic Arts Academy, you'll be able to see all of the upcoming live classes as well as those that are available on demand. And of course, to remind you that I have twice per month my intuitive mediumship development class. Again, you can access that in person or online. That one is limited because we do a lot of personal coaching, a lot of one-on-one coaching and practicing. Okay, having said all of that, I'm really excited for today's episode. I have a lovely, lovely spirit in this studio today. She has a diploma in clinical hypnotherapy with honors from HMI College. She's a certified therapeutic imagery hypnosis for immune disorders, past life regression, hypnosis in labor and childbirth. It's so much. I want to say all of it, though. I want to say all of it. Smoking cessation, weight loss, healing the child within, EFT, which I love, EFT and tapping, trauma recovery, body syndrome derived from psychosomatic medicine, and fears and anxieties. Oh my gosh. So she just can help you with everything that's messing you up. She also has studied various energy healing modalities such as Reiki, chakra alignment, clearing energy blocks, and key balancing. So her name is Desi Ivanova. Welcome to the studio.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. I'm so excited to start a friendship with you two. Desi and I just met fairly recently who's been on the show, David Gandelman, who has a podcast called Energy Matters and a new podcast called Grounded Sleep with David Gandelman. So go check out David's work. He's just amazing. To give him a plug, yeah. Right? Yes. He's like everyone's new best friend when you meet him.
Yeah. So, and when you listen to him, he just kind of becomes, his voice is amazing.
Lovely, yes, his spirit. But you and your spirit and the work that you're doing, I just find it so fascinating. I really love I use the model of hypnosis in my teaching as well because, meditation is hypnosis. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I help people to open up in the same way that you do, to access that subconscious mind, to open up that spiritual aspect of themselves and manifest it into their lives or their intuitive abilities, bypass that conscious mind that we seem to be addicted to. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So actually, would you mind telling everyone, what is your journey with this? How did you get into this work?
All my initial degrees were all in acting, right? So I'm an actor. Mm-hmm. I have a bachelor's in theater and a master's in film. So for me, it was always about the human psyche, understanding people, understanding humanity. Even when I got a character, I never judged a character. I always found them fascinating.
Beautiful.
I thought, wow, what drives people? That's why I loved being an actor, because I get to walk in someone's shoes for that brief amount of time and just do some research. And it just made me feel like it reduces that illusion of separation.
Yes.
Right? It kind of makes you expand and be everybody at the same time. So that was always fascinating to me. And then I also come from a family of doctors, so a lot of healers that was shown to me growing up. And one day when I decided that I have another calling, I thought, well, there's something missing. Like I do love my acting and I write and all that, but I feel like there's something else. And I said, universe, show me. And then suddenly I started meeting, first I started meeting people that had been to hypnosis, even my friends, like, oh, I just had, some hypnotherapy done. And I was like, what is that? I hadn't even heard of it. Like, and that was 4 years ago.
And that's amazing. So 4 years ago.
Yeah, 4 years ago. They were like, oh, I was like, oh, okay. And then little by little, it became just so frequent. All of a sudden, like everybody I was meeting was a hypnotherapist. I'm like, what? Is that like a new trend or?
They're like, no, just like the last 200 years.
Right, exactly. Right.
In Western culture.
And then I started researching and I was like, no, that's been on for quite some time. Yeah. And I think it got popularized in America in the 80s, It was,
it's even in it started in the 60s and 70s, but it got really popular in the 80s.
That's what I saw, yeah. So I was like, okay, so it's not new. So I started getting the hints. I'm like, all right. And then I finally met a close, my friend's girlfriend at the time, who was the closest resource I could talk to. And I woke up one morning with this voice in my head, you need to become a hypnotherapist. And I just jumped up on bed. I'm like, all right, who do I call? And they said, call Raquel, who is a wonderful, lovely hypnotherapist. So I immediately just texted her. I said, hey, I would love to chat to you and pick your brains about hypnosis. And she directed me to HMI, which is the college in Tarzana. Amazing. I took some free classes. You can take free classes. I experienced it. It felt like Hogwarts.
Yeah.
You go there so much. It was fascinating. I did energy healing. It was like a free class in energy healing, and that's the first one I took, and I was like, yes. So I immediately signed up and I started.
Tell us who Raquel, what is her last name so we can give her a plug too?
Oh, yes, Raquel Barantes.
Okay, great. Yes. Yeah. So she works with it.
She's a hypnotherapist as well.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So find Raquel.
Yes. Yes,
She's
find Raquel.
Inspiration to Desi.
Absolutely.
And what is HMI? What is the acronym or the initialism of HMI? What's the full name of that college?
So it's a Hypnosis Motivation Institute.
Is it only an institute that is taken locally, or can people take it online and
No,
non-locally?
they can take it online and internationally as well.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Yes.
Okay,
They
great.
have a whole international department.
I love that. And so there's something about that phenomenon, like you said, like hypnotherapy and hypnosis is generally speaking, universally pretty ubiquitous, but it was almost like you hadn't heard of it. It was like you hid it from yourself so you could have this powerful awakening experience to it.
Yes.
I've experienced that as well before, and it's so strange how that, you know what I mean? Like, how did I not align with that or just even hear it? Mm-hmm. But there's something about like a reason that you keep the filter on it for a while until you're like, ready.
Yes.
Isn't that fascinating?
So. Absolutely.
So I just wanted to highlight that because I feel like sometimes people think that the reason they haven't heard about it is because they're dumb or, they're not ready or they're not good enough. But move past that if you have that. I think it's a device that we experience between our higher self and this physical experience for a really exciting kind of journey.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely.
So you went to HMI, and you have a family of doctors, but it sounds like you having a relationship with your subconscious mind or with your higher self, being able to speak to the universe, as you were saying.
Yes.
So how were you set up for that in your belief system to be an allowance of that so openly?
I think, since I was a little girl, I always had those experiences. I always had a lot of dreams. I would have like somebody whisper, "Wake up! Your alarm's not going to go off." So it's already 6:05, and I'd wake up, and that would be the time. I even had like a little fairy. I still remember that in grade 7, a little fairy showed me everything that's going to come on my geography test. It was like,
we haven't talked about fairies before, but I almost at the beginning of the broadcast said something about, like your fairy energy. I was like, I don't know if I haven't actually like connected with her if she actually has a, allowance of that experience.
I do, I'm completely open to whatever. And to me, it's like whether it's, I believe whether it's a human way to, to make it part of the human experience, whatever these energies are. I don't know if they really exist as a fairy, but it's a fairy energy.
Right.
It's all these energies.
It's the way we experience it. Yes.
Exactly. The way humans do.
Right. It's, because I work with the concepts of like archangels and all of that. And yes, of course, like if there truly are benevolent, if those are benevolent energies, the friggin' labels and the portals that we use for them don't matter. Yeah. But there's also something that is very comforting and encouraging about that collective common experience.
Exactly.
Like you experienced a fairy when you were a kid. I experienced fairies as well. And so we can come together on that. But that's still, we're meant to be the meta to that experience.
Exactly.
Even, they don't, otherwise it becomes dogma, right?
Exactly. I agree.
And it limits. So, okay. So you've always had, and I guess perhaps either you were immune to conditioning that sort of that asks us to shut that kind of stuff down to some degree, or there's always awakening, there's always conditioning and then awakening no matter what. But then you moved into your work, and that, like you said, only 4 years ago that you started the school.
That was interesting. 3 years ago I started the school. 4 years. Wow. A few years ago my interest was awakened, and then
amazing.
3 years I started the school.
All of the preparation you did, though, before that, just...
Absolutely.
Yeah, again, I wanted to highlight that, because if you are standing at the crossroads of feeling like, I want to shift, I want to do something that's more in alignment with what I truly feel, like my home frequency, that time becomes completely subservient to it. It becomes an aspect of that. It is an aspect. It is a property of your higher purpose and activity.
Absolutely.
And
things
really
just
exciting.
aligned so quickly for me. The moment I tapped into it, it was just like, boom, boom, boom. It's just started coming in. Similar was with my acting to start with. I was, but this one was so much more powerful. It was just happened. Time really, that was just instantly.
Yes.
Everything was just coming at me.
So cool. I actually have a background in acting too. As an actor as a child all the way up. Let's see, I kind of stopped around my early 20s, and then I kind of started a little bit again around my late 20s and early 30s.
What?
Yeah. and then when after I had like my awakening, such that it is in this metaphysical sense, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm interested in acting again. And I went back and I kind of wasn't interested anymore.
Right, yeah, because you fulfilled the need.
Yes, the thing that it was drawing me to.
Yeah.
And I still love it, and it's still a part of my experience. But what I was experiencing as an actor, the reason I had such a draw to it is because of the channeling aspect of it. Right. The aspect of the human psyche and the human experience and the poetry of all of that. So how has acting shifted since you've come into this work?
Now it's shifted to a point, like, I still love it. I actually find that I love to create more. I like to make more and more of my projects.
Totally. And I think that was what I started to feel when I went back and I just went to a class, you know what I mean? And I was like, this feels limiting, this text and this character. And but there is no character. They're just, they're a snapshot of any particular human. But I think that was just how like that shoe felt too tight for me.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I can't be on projects that I don't align with.
Yes.
If the message doesn't align with me, I physically cannot put myself there. So I find myself sort of not going on many auditions just because I'm like, oh, it's just not for me.
I don't want to feel that.
It's like, it's just not for me. Like, it's not the stories that I want to tell.
Yes.
So I still feel like I have so many stories to tell. And it's part of healing too. Storytellers, like my father's doctor, he used to always say, referring to my acting, said, well, I'm a healer of the body and you're a healer of the soul. And I feel that sort of transcended even in the hypnosis.
Wow. Oh, I love your father. What a beautiful...
Yes, I love him too.
And so you are then creating your own projects. You are writing and producing and directing along those lines?
I don't direct, I produce. I direct for theater, but in film, it's mainly my boyfriend, my partner. He's a director, and other friends that I have. I usually take people on board to fulfill my vision. Maybe one day, maybe one
it's
day.
just a whole different skill set.
Yeah.
As to whether you're excited about it, who knows?
Yes, exactly. Let's see what the future brings. But as long as the stories that I write are being put out there, that's important to me.
My husband actually he gave me a really interesting, he's a film composer, and we were talking about James Franco, actually. There's an original Hulu TV series right now called 11/22/63.
I love that.
Are you watching
it?
Yes, yeah.
I just
watched the first episode, which is an hour and a half long, so it was really like 3 episodes. And I came across it, and I said and it's about, I read the description, it's like James Franco, who I think is great, and it's like he finds a time portal. I'm like, check in,
Yes,
definitely into that. And I said to my husband, I was like, what do you think about this? Like, what's your feel or your read about that? And he's like, well, if James is directing it, if he wrote and directed it, I don't know. But if someone else did, I think he's a phenomenal actor. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I was asking him like why he thinks it is, because he thinks James Franco is an amazing actor. Mm-hmm. And he said, I think because he is so versatile as an actor and has like that versatility and that broad kind of expanded experience actually right now at least isn't translating to director, because directors tend to have a really narrow language. And he's like, just think about it. What is Spielberg and I can't think of any other directors right now. It's because it's a Spielberg project. So, he's like, they all have a specific language and you know what they feel like. And James is kind of like more expanded than that.
Yeah.
As to whether he develops a language of his own too. That is possible. You can have both skill sets.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a
really
point.
interesting.
Yeah. Interesting.
We're on a whole different thing. Yeah. Well, I love to talk about art and creativity too, and how it functions.
It's all part of it.
Yeah. Well, yes, and I think that's a good segue into actually how hypnosis works, or hypnotherapy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, is there really any distinction between hypnosis and hypnotherapy? I guess hypnosis is an experience. Hypnotherapy is a job.
Yeah, hypnotherapy, they refer to as clinical hypnotherapy, just to sort of distinguish it between the stage hypnosis that occurs, versus hypnotherapy, so people can know that, okay, this can actually help me. It's a form of therapy that, I can shift and change my subconscious mind.
Yes. It's interesting talking about the 80s when hypnosis became, more popular or more sought after in some ways for things like losing weight and quitting smoking tend to be the top two things people think of hypnosis associated with, but also that stage hypnosis thing. And I was actually watching, it's a documentary about this person called The Amazing Randi, who was this skeptic of, he was actually a magician, but a skeptic of psychics, and had kind of this big career against psychics and trying to dispel the myths of psychics. And the big focal point in the 80s was about spoon bending. And I was like, why is everyone so fascinated with spoon bending in the 80s? And so the stage hypnosis is the same kind of thing. It's something about that fascination was about wanting to be rescued, and that's I think the misconception about hypnosis and hypnotherapy is that you somehow are possessed almost, whether it's a fear or a fascination with it. And so I think that's something you can explain, right?
Yeah. So in hypnosis,
make you balk like a chicken and all that kind of stuff.
And so it's possible, and you know why? Because we divide people. We call something. We have a term called suggestibility, which is how you take in information. So we have physical suggestibles, emotional suggestibles, and you have the one in between, which is a somnambulist. So the emotional suggestible, and that's based on your primary caregiver, so your mother in a traditional family. Perhaps not, but your primary caregiver, if your primary caregiver was very direct with you, if they were like, okay, dinner is at 7, then once you've watched dinner, you can go watch cartoons till 8, and then you have to be in bed, and they follow through, you become a very direct suggestible. You become a physical suggestible. You take information very directly. So whatever I say to you, you'll kind of take it literally. Right. And there's variations of that, but mostly people tend to take information very directly, and then they speak very metaphorically. The opposite is the emotional suggestible, which they're very analytical, because they usually had a primary caregiver, their mother, that was quite ambiguous. They couldn't quite tell. She could be saying one thing but then doing something else. If mum was saying like, okay, whatever, dinner's at 7, but then she doesn't care if, you came late. And so you learn to read between the lines. Or perhaps mum was very emotional and you weren't sure when she was angry. She'd say one thing but then she'd be upset about, So if mum was a bit more...
loose with her,
exactly, and spoken metaphors, then you'll learn to read between the lines. You become a very analytical type of person. So you become an emotional suggestible. Now, if you look at the emotional, who always reads between the lines, it's very difficult to hypnotize them. And up until, I think, the 60s, they were thought to be unhypnotizable, because they were just, whereas the physical, they take suggestions directly. And then somnambulist is someone in between. It's people that you might even notice their eyes. They're slightly, those airy-fairy people that are slightly like, oh my God, they're kind of fascinated by everything around them. And they're like, oh yeah. And then they're onto this experience. And you tell them something, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. They just kind of like have that childlike quality about them. They're the most hypnotizable people.
Right.
So when a stage hypnotist asks certain questions, and there's tricks, I'm not going to give them away, but you can tell in the audience, okay, who's a direct suggestible and who's a somnambulist, and you're going to pick those. And mainly you're going to pick the somnambulist because, whatever you put in their head, they're excited to do it. They want to please. They want to be part of it. You'll never pick an emotional suggestible because they will analyze everything.
They'll just be like, you can't do this to me.
Right, exactly. So they pick the somnambulist and the direct suggestibles.
So I think that I am between physical and somnambulist.
Could be.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I did which we're going to talk about in a moment.
In a moment we're talking about suggestibility, which is how you take in information. And then I want to touch on the topic of sexuality, which is behavior, and it's how you behave in relationships.
Right. Not like heterosexual, homosexual. It's about your sexual relationships, your partnerships.
Partnerships, exactly. Yes. How you behave.
But those sound very directly related as what I've been researching about the emotional and physical sexual. So just again to recap, when you say emotional, it's interesting because the affect is more analytical.
Exactly.
It's less physical as the affect, because of what you're responding to. So you're actually responding to the experience of having, like, trying to counterbalance the emotional aspect. So if your mother was more of an emotional, let's say, free spirit, then you respond to that by becoming an emotional, but that looks like analytical.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And so then the converse for the other side. Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. And that was a theory developed by Dr. Kappas, the founder of the school of HMI.
Yes.
And he developed, with suggestibility. Suggestibility, how you take in information, helps us a lot with clients because, if I get somebody who's an emotional suggestible, meaning quite analytical, then I know exactly the hypnosis I'm going to create for them in order to bypass their critical mind and go into their subconscious and help them.
Right.
Because even though they're consciously saying, yes, please help me, that the subconscious is still, they're still prodding you and they're still not believing you. So there's different methods to get to their subconscious mind.
They're kind of saying, if you think about the inner child, it's like, I don't know if I trust you. And the reason, because we're always speaking to our mother, who that primary caregiver is. Mom said dinner was at 7, but she didn't really mean it. And so I had to do that. So are you going to tell me that we're going to do this and you're not going to do it?
Exactly. Exactly. That's what got. And so all that subconscious work that is not consciously present, but underneath, that's all happening.
And the way that we kind of get in the blended areas of that is, for example, I'm thinking of my mother, and I'm also thinking of my mother-in-law, how she worked with my husband. And I feel like my mother was less structured, but sometimes would become very structured, like a couple, for a certain amount of time. And then same thing but my husband is like, again, the opposite. She was mostly structured, but then sometimes would kind of be like, not. Yeah. So I think we both, I haven't asked my husband yet to take the relationship test that we're about to discuss, but I'll bet that we're kind of just the opposite a little bit, just mirrors of one another.
Yeah, you tend to find a partner that's kind of that
balance.
To balance you out.
Right. All right. So, okay, so the suggestibility factor, but with the folks who are, let's say the emotional type, therefore affective, that would be the analytical type. You still can work with them. Is it a different kind of experience? There's a different set of techniques or skills?
Yes, there's just a different set of techniques. You also want to speak, the scripts that you create for them should be more metaphorical. So they're the ones that I would use a lot of guided imagery for. So I'm not directly, because if I told them directly, if somebody came and they want to be more confident, first of all, they're not going to respond if I directly suggested, okay, and now you are more confident. They'd be like, no, that's exactly what I'm not.
You're just phoning it in, Mom. Wait, I mean, not Mom. I mean therapist.
Right. So you want to be more, you have to use metaphors. Yeah. You have to slowly guide them there so that they come up to their own conclusions. They have made the decision. Right.
Okay. So you teach at Den Meditation in both Studio City and La Brea. That is a meditation studio, and here in Los Angeles, they have 2 locations. And so you do group guided journeys.
Right.
So do you do a mix because there are 30 people there? So you have to account for all 3 types of suggestibles, right?
Right, exactly.
Oh, fascinating.
Yes. And so I'm not worried with my somnambulists because they'll take anything I give them. So that's great. Direct suggestibles, they'll respond to both.
Yeah.
The only thing is the emotionals, yes. So with the emotionals, that's why when I do group, I do a lot of guided imagery, you know. And very much, in the end, I'll insert some direct suggestions, but once you've already massaged the subconscious to open up and they've already gone on that journey and now they're open to receive the direct suggestions.
So being more on as the emotional suggestible, when I do either guided or group experiences, I find myself some part of the time going like, shh, can you be quiet? Because I'm busy.
Yeah.
I want to take control of it.
Yeah.
That's my emotional. So how, as the sitter, as the person receiving that, as being more of the emotional type, how can I relax into maybe becoming more of a somnambulist? Is that possible?
You could shift your suggestibility, but that would have to be one-on-one. You know, we would have to work together. And then the more you trust me, the more you will start to shift and the more easier you'll be able to access it. It's harder to do in groups unless, you know, you're a regular coming in and then you begin to really build a rapport with each other. Because a big chunk of it is you have to have a rapport with your therapist in order for your subconscious mind to listen to the suggestions.
Right. Okay. So only go to my friend's meditation classes.
Yes. Exactly, if you're overly analytical.
Or make more friends.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
That's so funny. And so then, what was my next question? So, okay, well, go. I'll let you go on. I had a question. It'll show up again.
Well, I wanted to actually explain, we're talking about hypnosis, so I wanted to explain exactly how it works if we want to pull up the model of the theory of mind is what we call.
So those of you who are listening on the podcast feed, you can go check it out later if you like. We're putting up a graphic to illuminate what Desi is going to explain to us, the theory of mind.
I can also, if you're just listening for your listeners, you can also imagine an iceberg, right? And it's been often drawn as an example for the theory of mind, which is you've got that little top half on the iceberg, which is your conscious mind, and then that big chunk underneath is your subconscious mind, if you imagine the iceberg. And then the water surface is this lid, is the barrier between the conscious and subconscious. And I'll explain to you now how it's built. So when we're first born, if you have a look at the bottom of your iceberg, and at the bottom of this diagram is your primitive mind. And that's the one thing that you're born with. So you're born with your fight and flight response, which is basically the theory is that when we were cavemen, if we were hungry and wanted to get out of the cave to hunt for food, if we encountered the saber-toothed tiger and we feel equipped enough and strong enough, we'll fight it. So we're going to fight mode. Therefore, your body activates that whole system, you know, along with it, all the chemicals, the adrenaline to fight. If not, if you feel like you're weak enough and you might get eaten, you will flight. So you go back to your cave until the danger passes. And nowadays, we still carry this. We still respond that way. So now fight has become anxiety and flight is depression. Not that clinical depression, but those down and out days where you're so overwhelmed by life that you just want to sit in your cave and that, you know, you just...
And this also feels like it has some kind of parallel to the emotional and the physical as well. Perhaps.
In a way.
I would say, well, for me personally, it feels like I would be a bit, because I tend more to the anxious.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know if I'm ever depressed. I think I'm
always anxious. Right. Yeah. So it could be
two sides of the same coin. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm feeling like the over analytical kind of tendency would be more related to, well, think about it. If you were overly analytical, then that would be more anxious. If you were overly emotional, then that would be more depressive.
Well, emotional is the analytical.
Right. No, I know. I'm talking about the inner experience.
Oh, emotional experience. Right. But you can be also analyzing in your depressed state, I guess.
Well, they're two sides of the same coin. That's why it's usually called anxiety, depression disorder a lot of the time, because you flip.
Exactly. Yeah. You flip in between both.
Yeah. All right. Sorry. Go ahead. That's fascinating.
But so yeah, these are the main. And they also say that we're born with only two fears of loud noises and fear of falling. And again, it's the same cave theory that, you know, when you're a baby, caves were usually up in, you know, holes up in mountains and stuff. So if the baby rolls over, it's going to fall. And fear of loud noises is because when the predator comes, you can hear the nails scratching.
Wow.
Where you have that also the screech from the chalkboard.
Yes.
They say that, you know, how sends shivers down your spine is because that's the theory, is that it's the predator's nails.
Yeah.
And that's the memory, that your DNA memory of that, of predators coming, so you're like alert.
Wow, yeah.
So that's everything we're born with, as far as we know.
That's awesome. That's all. Just that.
That's all. That's
Just
all the memory, plus all the DNA from your ancestors and all the crap you carry.
all the shit they got up to.
And then you begin to build, as you see on the diagram, you begin to build your positive and negative associations, right? You begin to build your world of beliefs, or whatever mum says, whatever parent, all your parents, whatever teachers say in kindergarten, peers, and you build your associations. And to give you a simple example, say you owned a dog as a child, so you have a very positive association to dogs, versus if you got bit by one, you got a very negative association, right? And then we can get into smoking. If your favorite uncle smoked, you have a very positive association to smoking. If smoking was really looked down upon and created some troubles in your household, you look down and you've got a negative association to smoking.
Check.
And so
That's
on.
mine.
Mine too.
I'm like, it's a scourge on humanity. And my friend's like, it's sexy. I'm like, you're wrong.
Right, there you go. So
You're just inaccurate.
You build your subconscious mind. It's your world. However you were conditioned, that's where you build. And so as you're building it and you're creating your world, these become your knowns, right? They're your known associations. So they're familiar, therefore comforting for you. So whether they're positive or negative, in actuality, it does not matter, because your subconscious mind locks them in as this is your world. And because the subconscious mind always wants to stay in homeostasis, it wants to pick one way to be. Again, it's a form of survival, right? I want to build my world. I want to make sure that this is my world. So I'm defending myself. These are my ways. This is where I want to live. And that's why it's so difficult for people to change.
Yes.
Because we're afraid. It's the fear. It's literally a survival fear. That
Change is
if
a
you
threat.
stray, it's a threat. If you stray from that, but will I be alive though?
Yeah.
This is, you don't know if you're safe.
There's no proof that I'll survive.
Exactly.
Because I've survived, even if it's negative. You know what I mean? This is how we get into patterns. Why do I keep picking the same asshole after to date?
Right.
Well, you lived through the asshole.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll live through a person who treats me better or something.
Right. Yeah.
And so it takes the deep introspection.
Right. And it can be children of abuse as well. If to them love was abuse, if your
was
family,
attention.
that was attention, then that's the patterns they're seeking out.
I had in my experience, maybe I don't want to say neglect. I don't want to make it that, but in a way, a neglect. But one of my sisters paid a lot of attention to me by way of teasing. And even still, I love when like my closest friends and my husband tease me.
There you go.
But it's lovingly. She loved me, but it was teasing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it just makes me feel so known and so comforted.
Exactly. Yes.
So funny. We're so messed up.
Yeah. So it's part of it's your world though. It's familiar. Exactly. And so as you build all that, the kids are like sponges up until the age of 8 or 9. And then as you see, you put that lid on, right? You put the lid and you begin to build your now conscious mind. It's where your reasoning, logic, analysis, decision-making begin to live. You begin to think for yourself, like ideas like, oh, Santa Claus, maybe he's not real.
Yeah, that's about that time.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
When some kids will be like, I wonder if it's what would be the more of the type who kind of maintains the illusion for the sake of their parents?
Right. Probably like
maybe the emotional one.
Yeah,
because they're trying to take care of their parents a little bit.
Yeah,
and because the parents, they think that their parents are very flighty or something like that.
Yeah. It could be that they're emotional. Yeah, I didn't think about that theory. I haven't thought about, or the tooth fairy or whatever.
Yeah.
Hopefully this is PG-13, so kids are not. I'm not breaking anyone's dreams.
I'm not. It's not PG-13.
Oh no, it's real. They're real.
It's NC-17.
Okay. So once you build your critical mind, not just any thought is going to drop down into your subconscious mind, right?
Right.
Now that you have your conscious mind, any thought, and you see how the difference, like there's just 12% versus that 88% underneath. If you think about the iceberg again, like that big chunk underneath versus that tiny thing you see on top.
I'm looking at the diagram here. That's why I'm not looking at you for a second.
Yes, and the diagram. So now, for example, say you've grown into an adult and you want to change a belief, like quit smoking, and you say, okay, 12% of me, by reason and logic, knows that smoking is really bad for my health. However, that idea is not just going to drop in and change our life. We have to first, it's going to stop at the critical mind, at the barrier. It's going to check in. It's going to go down and check in with your knowns, with your associations, and be like, oh, we have a positive association to smoking, and 88% of me thinks it's good.
Oof.
So 12% is not going to cut it, you know. So you're going to keep struggling with it because most of you wants to smoke. So what we do in hypnosis is we take away that critical mind. We just put it to sleep.
Right.
And so anything now you want is going to get dropped down directly into your subconscious mind and begin to shift and change. And of course it can happen. People often ask, like, how long does it take? How many sessions? Well, if the association is pretty clear, it could take 1 or 2 sessions. If, however, it's attached to something else and something else and
Supporting
a defense
beliefs,
around it. So all the supporting beliefs, it's like peeling an onion. You know, we're not going to know until we start. And my mission is never like, I want the client to be out quickly. Like, for me, I judge my success by how quickly can they be out of the office. Like, I want to heal them. I want to make sure that, you know, I don't want to keep anyone longer than necessary.
Right.
But oftentimes people don't understand that, well, sometimes it is. You need to dig deeper because there's a lot around that belief,
right?
All the supporting beliefs, and we can't just take things away. We have to replace them.
Yes.
Right. So we have to find ways of replacing them so that your mind feels safe, your subconscious is feeling safe.
And that's, I think, when we talk about it in terms of, I don't know, I guess just for lack of a better term, like spiritual seeking, and we talk about blocks. I have a block, and I want to remove this block, or I want to remove this pattern. The subconscious or the whole consciousness doesn't want to remove anything.
Yeah.
It wants to add something so that there's no room for the things that are limiting. And so a lot of times when people talk about I'm blocked and I need to remove it, I'm like, let's reframe that. Let's change that language, because we're not going to get there by telling ourselves we need to lop off parts of ourselves.
Right.
There's a reason why it's there, and also we're not going to get to it by fighting with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's amazing. So go.
Like you said, like every defense that we create is developed there for a reason. It's there to protect you. It was your initial. It's how you survived to start with, and it's just important to go in and check in. For example, beliefs from your childhood that were there to protect you. You can now go in and check and say, okay, how does my adult self see the world versus that? Because you are constantly, subconsciously, you're always functioning from that initial belief until you address it first. You're like, oh, wait a minute, that's not. I don't think about it that way, or perhaps that's not even my belief. I think that's my parents' belief. I'm thinking like my mother right now. That's not my actual thoughts. Right. Oftentimes we're constantly, we're bombarded by, it's my teacher's thought. It's somebody. So, the whole point of growing up and, it's like taking all that and adding your beliefs, but replacing them, replacing with the new. It's always like, okay, this is, I like to do this exercise where I will write them for myself. I'll write down 5 beliefs that I would like to remove. But once I've acknowledged them, then I'll write 5 ways to replace that. Yes. What is the new concept now? What is the new belief replacing the old?
And I find a doorway to do that is to just take that one that you want to shift or remove, however you language it, and ask, what am I afraid of? Or something along those lines.
Absolutely, yes.
And the opposite of that, the thing that you're afraid of, is the answer, the affirmative of whatever that fear would be. So if it's, I want to become an entrepreneur and not have to work for another company. What am I afraid of? That I won't be able to support myself. Well, what does that mean? I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not talented enough. Or the world is harsh and I'm disenfranchised.
Right.
And so find the positive. Is that how you kind of go about it? Is asking?
Yes, absolutely. And asking what it means to you, because everybody's different. Well, your fear can be completely different to my fear. Perhaps I can be afraid that being in the public eye is too much responsibility, or having a big firm is too much responsibility, and I don't know how to handle that, or that I don't trust myself with finances. I don't know what to do with all that money. So then maybe I'll sit down and make a list with, okay, if I had $1 million a month, if I earned $1 million a month, what would I do with it? And be very specific, so that it's in hypnosis, I help clients also create blueprints, right? So if you tell me, well, I want to be a successful businesswoman, but I just don't know what that looks like. So we'll talk about it. Like, okay, what do you think that looks like? And as we talk about it, I'm going to write all that down, and then in hypnosis, I'll feed that to you. And when you're in the state of hypnosis, the mind doesn't know the difference between reality and fantasy. So the way you're in hypnosis, you're using all your senses, you're fully and completely there. there in that moment. So your mind is being tricked into believing that it just experienced what it's like to be a successful businesswoman.
And didn't die.
And actually had a beautiful, wonderful experience.
Yes.
So boom, you have a very positive blueprint now in your mind that you can go from, and you can build on that. You can do it through more sessions or maybe even your own private work. But now at least you've created the root.
Right. And that is what a lot of higher consciousness and, the typical, I guess, spirituality, talking about conscious envisioning and, creating the frequency. And that way you can align with it, what people call the universal laws and the law of attraction. It's all of that really experiencing so that you know that it's safe to create it or to allow it even.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And with the law of attraction, I like to say, well, if it's the same thing, when I started thinking about hypnotherapy, all of a sudden I started seeing hypnotherapists, If I ask you to look at the color blue, or, maybe you didn't notice it, but all of a sudden you're going to start noticing the color blue everywhere you go because that's all you're thinking of.
Did you know that literally, what is the time period? I think that the color blue has only been in literature for about 300 years, I think it is. And so it begs the question as to whether people actually saw or named blue before then.
Oh, interesting.
Because the color blue didn't exist in literature. And so I don't know if 300 is the exact right number, but I think that's what it is. I feel like that's what I remember from it. So it's kind of funny that you brought that up.
I wonder, because I know that, in the...
Thanks, Kurt's trying to find it. I don't remember where I heard or saw that.
1200s, I think, when they used to draw with lapis lazuli.
Okay, so 1200s. So then it was much longer ago than that.
A while ago. Yeah. But I wonder if they named it.
But we're talking about literature in particular.
Oh, literature. Okay.
Yeah. So it is curious as to whether they, just if they thought of blue or understood blue maybe using lapis lazuli, maybe they thought of it as green. You know what I mean? Like maybe that was the name for it still, but perhaps that's that's the questioning around it, is as to whether they gave it its own qualification or if it were an aspect of another color that wasn't named yet. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I know nothing about it.
No, but I think it's fascinating because, like you said, so if you name it, if you start to orient to it, you named when it's hypnotherapy got named in your experience, and then it started showing up.
Absolutely, yes. No, I agree. With it, exactly. Whatever you name in your experience, whatever you create a blueprint for, and whatever you focus on. Exactly.
No pun intended.
A blueprint. No pun intended. It just starts to come into your life because you start to notice it. That's all.
Right.
So focus, where focus goes?
I talk about it as tuning.
Flows.
Yes, exactly. I talk about it as tuning. And that's how I help people to experience the different dimensions of our reality. They're all existing here and now. Being able to tune to them, that's what the experience of awakening is, to be able to... Did you find it, Kurt?
I found a couple references to it in the 6th century is when it really became popular.
In literature?
In literature.
Oh, okay. So
and
it's much
art.
longer ago than I said. Okay.
But it's probably when the lapis lazuli was quite popular.
Okay.
Yeah, the lapis lazuli looks like came in around 2200 BC in Egypt.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, so I'll look that up a little bit. We'll probably put links in the show notes, but I find it fascinating. But yeah, so naming it, I talk about it, like I say, as tuning. So you tune your energy to a frequency, and then you can experience it, and it's that simple. But how is it that simple? Because that's the thing. People, I think, they start to think about how that tuning or the thing we're talking about, we try to use that conscious analytical mind to do that, but that's not the guy whose job it is.
Yes. Well, that's why in hypnosis we bypass
we
that.
say, thank you, sir, have a seat.
Yes. Go to sleep. No.
Enough from you.
Yes. And that's why then all of your 100% attention is focused just on that, on what you want. And therefore you get to experience it fully and completely, and you lock it in, you anchor it into your subconscious mind. Because when we're consciously awake and thinking, we can be daydreaming about one thing, but if you're not 100% in it, you still have all these thoughts clouding and fogging it up, so you can't focus on it.
Then you have that static. So as I liken it to tuning, or it is literally tuning, then that's like a radio station that's like...
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. So you can kind of hear it. You know it's sort of there, but you're not fully applying yourself to it because the message is not clear. So yes, so that is how hypnosis works.
And you mentioned daily practice. So essentially, what you're doing is a kind of guided and deep probing into it. But we take that, we do that daily is how we really make true shifts in our life, and that would be what we call our meditation practice.
Absolutely, yes. So you pick whatever we've been working on in hypnosis. You can pick that. You can. Some people choose to journal it. Sometimes I'll give them journaling homework. Sometimes drawing. I love to make people draw their critical mind, and then sentence stem from when I hear my critical mind, I will silence it by, and then just like writing, because sometimes when you journal and you just write and write and write, you also bypass the critical mind.
Right.
And I encourage people to write anything that's coming up for them. So you can be thinking, oh, pizza, or any random thought, just write it down until it finally leads you to the right thing.
Because literally, don't judge it. Don't be critical of it.
Don't be critical, exactly.
If it's pizza, and you go, well, pizza's a stupid thing to think about when I'm trying to spiritually heal myself or whatever.
Write it all down. Just write it all down until it finally leads you to that. Yeah. And the other thing about working with the conscious subconscious is when we've opened that door, we've put that critical guy to sleep, now anything from our subconscious mind can also come to the surface. So if you have any questions and dilemmas about, I don't know if I like this, or I don't know if I should do this, well, we all know, right? Deep inside we know. It's there. It's in the subconscious. Yes. So when you go in hypnosis, we can ask, and you have the most profound, most wise questions. And they can be, sometimes I'll ask people to talk to their guides, to their wise ones within, whatever you want to believe. Doesn't matter whether you believe that it was actually really, communicated through your spirit guide. Who am I to say?
Who cares?
Who cares?
Who knows? Actually, the caring part of it is, feeling it with your passion and, again, not judging it. Yes. It's all about being able to put that critical mind is supposed to be an assistant. He's not supposed to be the director.
Yes.
He's meant to execute. He's not meant to lead.
Yes, absolutely.
And that I actually did have a QHHT, quantum healing hypnosis technique session, and I was I forgot I wasn't thinking about this as I told my husband the story last night. I wasn't thinking about the fact that you were coming on today. But in my quantum healing hypnosis technique session, one of the things that I wanted to ask, because I was going blind last year, for many years. I had really extreme cataracts, that like they call them young person cataracts, because they're not the aged ones. It's like my lenses were very damaged. And for months, I was trying to decide to get the surgery or to allow myself to be the spiritual person that just has a miraculous healing. And I'm like, I don't know which one, because I know that it's possible that the spirit actually is what creates the body anyway.
Right.
And so in my session, I asked that, and the answer came that I wasn't interested in experiencing it through that just purely energetic way. I wanted to experience it through science. I had beliefs that it would clear up more of it and faster, and it was a faster road.
Right.
And if I had the experience of, let's say, spontaneous healing, it just didn't align with the work that I wanted to do. Because it would take up a lot of time. Because who am I if I had a spontaneous healing and I went to the doctor and they're like, we've never seen anything like this. This is a phenomenon. Yeah. Then I would be an asshole to not share that, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that work.
Right.
And there's more to it. There were supporting beliefs that even created the particular, not disease, but the injury. And of course, there was stuff. My mother has similar injury. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of stuff that led up to it. Yeah. But being able to own the experience that I wanted to choose, which was through science, that was like deeply healing. I kind of healed up all of those supporting beliefs that brought me there.
Yeah.
And so I remember that. That was pretty interesting.
But that's amazing how you knew it, right? You knew the answer. You came up with it. And then once you know, you feel safer to proceed with it and go ahead.
Because it's aligned,
right,
with who you are.
Right.
So now how much time do we have? Oh, we're almost out of time. Kurt, we're going to go 3 more hours, okay?
Go ahead. Yeah, that's fine.
Well, okay, maybe we can touch a bit on the emotional and sexual.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that, because I find it helps so much in relationships. It's helped me in my personal relationships and everybody I've shared it with. Dr. Kappas, the founder of HMI, he invented this. He came up with this theory. He was an MFD, so he saw over 35,000 couples, I think. And he would go to court to just observe behavior. So he came up with this theory about the emotional and physical. Now, we're not talking about suggestibility, behavior/sexuality. So how you behave in your relationships, which kind of translates in your also friendships and all that, but mainly in your intimate relationships, right?
Yes.
So the physical and the emotional. Let's start with the physical. The physical is a child that got a lot of attention from the secondary caregiver. Now, in your traditionally structured family, that would be the father, but it can be anybody. It can be, like you said, your sister or whoever was your secondary, who was there to take care of you growing up. Sometimes if you grew up with a single mother, it can be all the mother, So if you got attention, whether it's positive or negative, if the attention was on you, you grow up to be a physical. What that means is your priorities go like this. First comes sex and relationships. For the physical, sex is very important in the relationship because to them that's attention, that's validation. Number 2 for them is friends and family. You find the physicals, they tend to have a lot of friends, they're all the family, they love everybody, you know, they're always, you know, just they nourish and nurture a lot of friendships.
Almost
usually.
like, that sounds almost like more extroverted even.
Yes,
yeah, deriving their energy from relationships.
Yes, you would find there are variations and there's a scale, like the test. You have to do a test and then to see like, okay, on this scale, what one are you? And how much, what percentage of a physical and or an emotional you are. But, you know, talking generally, they tend to be more extroverted. And then for them, number 3 is hobbies, things to do for myself. And number 4, last, is career, financial stability. That's not to say that they don't like their career, don't want to be financially stable. No, it's just to say that if something is wrong up top in the relationship or the sex department, everything down the line sort of begins to crumble. It's harder for them to focus at work. It's harder for them to focus on their friendships or their hobbies because they're constantly, you know, thinking about that. Also, the physical, the biggest fear is rejection. Because, you know, again, all the attention was on them. They don't want to be rejected. They're terrified. Of course, everybody fears rejection, but the physical is particularly prominent because to them, attention is everything.
Attention, rejection is death.
Yes, rejection is complete death. For the emotional, on the other hand, there was somebody that was sort of left alone most of the time growing up. You know, the secondary wasn't as affectionate, cuddly, or didn't even pay any attention. The attention was not given. So to them, I love you means just give me space. You know, let me have. So they tend to be the ones in the relationship that want a lot of space. More so, everybody wants space. Again, the people say, but why? No, but the emotional more so because to them, they don't even know what it's like to be doted upon and complimented all the time. To them, I love you means just leave me be. And so for them, number 1 is financial stability and their career. Number 2 is hobbies, things I want to do for myself. Number 3 is friendships, relationships. And number 4, last, is sex. Okay. They don't even relate relationship to sex. You know, to sex for them is not that important. That's not to say they don't like sex. It's just not, they don't have to have sex like 5 times a week.
Right.
They'll be the ones that, because they don't need to be validated. Their biggest fear is loss of control of physical body. So you'll see if you have an emotional partner, you might notice that they don't really want to be touched too much, or particularly if they're too hot, too sweaty. They're very, you know, the physical body is very sacred for them. So they don't want to be, again, there could be even a physical could not like touch, but from your emotional partner, from your intimate partner, you usually like that as a physical. Whereas emotional, if they're not feeling quite there, if they're not fully 100% focused on what they're doing, they don't want to be touched.
Right.
An example is, you know, emotional, physical, go to watch a movie, and that's not in the honeymoon part. Way past
distant,
honeymoon, you know, and they're sitting watching a movie with your husband of 3 years. The husband, if he's an emotional, he's going to want to watch the movie, you know, even though, you know, if the physical partner gets a little, you know, hot and heavy, the emotional will be like, no, I'm watching a movie.
I thought we were watching a movie.
Yeah, right.
That's the agreement we had.
Right. And they can be both, you know, male or female. Oftentimes you'll find that there's defenses. What we call is like culturally, say like Latin America, they tend to be a very physical culture. So they're more touchy-feely, they're more sex-oriented. So you might find an emotional with a physical defense, which is even though they're an emotional on the inside, they still have more tendency to be touchy-feely. They're still a bit more sexual than your usual emotional versus maybe somebody in Japan, where Japan is a lot more, you know, conservative culture, and their culture is naturally emotional. They're more distance, more respect. Everything's more analytical. So a physical in that will have an emotional defense. You know, maybe there's something. It takes them a while to open up physically, and maybe, you know, if you were to compare like 100% physical, 100% emotional, 100% physical would be somebody that like dresses flashy and wants to show off, and 100% emotional would be somebody like a professor that is just fully focused on their books and you know, just kind of doesn't care about the outside world and just wants to analyze and you know, be in their head.
Right.
And you find, and that's 100%.
Right.
Nobody's 100%. You know?
Right.
everybody has a mixture of
That's
both.
like the introvert extrovert model too. You'd be insane if you were either.
Absolutely.
Jung said that. I believe he came up with the introvert extrovert model. I believe, right?
Who did?
Carl Jung.
I'm not
believe
sure
so.
If he, I don't know.
Or maybe he at least expanded it. But if anybody were 100% introverted or extroverted, they would need to be committed.
Absolutely, yes. It does not absolutely. It does not exist. It does not exist. But why it's important to know that is, especially once you do the test and you'll have the links, you can say there's a whole book about it. Yeah. There's lectures online that we don't have enough time for me to explain everything in detail. But I like to say that because in relationships, the physical partner, initially when the relationship starts and you're in the honeymoon period, everything's, the emotional is acting physical. They want to have sex all the time. Yeah. They're there for you all the time. But once that kind of fizzles out, then the emotional will settle into their behavior, into their sexuality, and then the physical will start to feel very rejected. Because all of a sudden it's like, well, why are we not having sex every day? And why are you not telling me how beautiful I am? And, for the emotional, that doesn't come quite naturally. They're like,
I have a job.
Right. And for them, for the emotional, it's like, I'm here, therefore I love you.
Yes.
The physical, they want to hear, I love you all the time. They want to hear compliments all the time. And they'll feel so offended by the fact. And then there's a lot of conflict starts to happen. And then the thing is with the emotional is the more you push them, the more the emotional doesn't like conflict, right? They're not that well connected with their physical body. It takes them a little longer to process emotion. It's funny that they're called emotional, but they actually don't process emotion that quickly. They need some time in solitude to really assess it. The physical, they very much act on impulse. They're like, well, this is what I'm feeling. And then, that comes with also being too impulsive sometimes. We're not analyzing, how you feel, and perhaps sometimes offending or jumping to conclusions too fast. With the emotional, they really take a seat back and they tend to be a bit more analytical. And unless, of course, everybody has a boiling point.
Yes.
I'm sure emotionals can explode too as much as physicals can retreat.
And once again, this is, two things about it. I mean, like I took the test and I'm 58-42, which is like so close. So I would draw, right. I'm relating to both aspects and maybe one a little bit more than the other a lot of the time. And you take this particular test, which by the way, however you're listening or watching, there is a link to take this free and really interesting test as you actually take it. And to find out what your percentage is. You relate it to the relationship you're in right now, or you can relate it to a previous relationship, right. And in which case you might get completely different numbers.
Right.
I only took it with my marriage because we've been together 15 years, so I don't remember their whole relationships. And
you can have a track record of always, dating the opposite, or sometimes you'll notice when you've dated the same, like physical and physical when you've dated. Like I said, that they have that physical and physical because they're both all about like love and they're all about like, sex and wanting to be validated. Then once they meet, it's an explosion, like that.
And then it burns down.
Yes, and then it can burn down. Absolutely. And it's more challenging sometimes to physical with the physical, especially if they're both high physicals on the scale, because the physical, they tend to control the relationships. In a relationship, the physical usually leads the relationship, meaning like they'll organize things. They'll be the ones planning. They'll be the emotional takes more of a backseat. They kind of worry more about their job, their finances, and all that. And that's not, again, like it could be, he's a stay-at-home dad, but he'll be really focused on doing that, like being a stay-at-home dad and focusing on the house and the garden, etc. Right. But however, the physical will be the one that's more romantic, so to speak. They would have that more idea of like, okay, let's go here and let's go there, and then to be more spontaneous.
This all kind of relates to that book, The Love Languages, too.
Yes.
Which I don't know a lot about.
There is.
I've never read it, but I know a little bit about that. And it's kind of the same thing. There are five love languages they outline, and you might have 2 or 3 of them are really major, and then a few supporting. And
absolutely. So with the physical, for example, the touch is huge for them. Yeah. For a physical, they really want to be touched. Compliments are huge for them. The emotional, they're more about services. The emotionals, they provide services for you. They really like that. Gift giving, I think, goes kind of both ways depending. But yeah, the emotional, they're always, the fact that they're there for you means that they love you.
Right.
And it's good to understand the partners and then kind of work together because, then each has to lean a bit,
It's sort of in that book, The 4 Agreements, take nothing personally.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
If you become defensive or hurt or rejected, it's really about how you understand what your partner how they express themselves and understand what your needs are, and then, you know, just move in that frequency, how it, you know, and if there is tension, that's an opportunity to expand.
Expand and talk about it and say, you know, maybe the emotional needs to make some changes to say like, okay, well, how do you need me to warm you up for us, for example, to have more sex? Or, you know, maybe you can get me flowers once a week, or I would love for you to, like, every morning compliment me.
But then the emotional is like, but if I tell you, if I have to tell you, then it doesn't count.
right. Yeah, the emotional is
I tapped into my emotional.
Right. Yeah.
Sexual is like, you're supposed to, and if you don't know, then it's not supposed to be important to me. It's like all this kind of control
the emotional
stuff.
Is very analytical.
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
The higher you are on the emotional scale, the more, the more you'll find that. And it's funny because you would generally attract the opposite partner.
And I think that I perhaps a common thing might be attracting the opposite partner, and then in some of the close friendships, the same. So you can kind of have some of that enhancing of the things, you know, that you're similar in.
Yes. You find that in friendships, you can have the same. You can have an emotional would have more emotionals, a physical would have more physicals. Yes.
So you can enhance that and explore it. And then there's a deeper intimacy with actually fitting your puzzle pieces together. And like, you know how it fits.
Absolutely. And you know, it's funny that we're talking about sex and penetration, because the way to very quickly depict, especially with men, a physical and emotional, a male physical will, for example, ejaculate a few times within the intercourse. So,
that's exhausting.
Yes, right.
Wow.
So they can.
But isn't there a physical mechanism that makes like a physical talent that would support that or not?
It could, absolutely could, of course. Now, if they're not capable of doing so, But usually, because they want more of that attention, and you'll find that even, you know, they say, oh, it changes with age, but no, you'll find that even with age, they will the physical male will still
I've heard
want that, especially if they're on the higher scale physical,
right?
They will still be very sexually active, and they will be, you know, they will ejaculate several times within like the night.
That's, you know, that is really interesting, because you always hear that, oh, your hormones decrease and then men lose their sex drive. And I'm like, but we know many stories of men who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and you're like, no one can stop that guy.
Right.
And
it's probably high physical.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Okay, we are seriously way over time.
And the emotional is the opposite. They'll ejaculate once and they're done.
Okay.
That's it, you know.
Well, I think we'll end this episode with ejaculation. Sounds like a enlightened AF, doesn't it, Kurt? By the way, I should mention that I do have another podcast with a partner, Aidan Demarest. And it's called Enlightened AF, and you know, you guys can find that also on YouTube and iTunes. You should come on sometime. It's really fun. Yeah. It's super fun. Well, tell everyone how the work that you're doing, how they can get in touch with you. Of course, we have Desi's links in the show notes as well.
Right. Well, so you can come to Den Meditation to do a group hypnosis. You can also find me on Instagram, Hypnosis Symbiosis. My email is symbiosishypnosis@gmail.com. That's my.
And you do one-on-one sessions.
And I do one-on-one sessions
remotely as well.
Remotely, yes, I do online sessions via Zoom or Skype. Yes. And I can do in-house as well. Super. In the office.
Okay, well, this has been amazing. Seriously, I'm sorry to keep you long.
No, I love it. We can just talk, and and if you're interested, people are interested more in the emotional and physical, you will probably provide the links.
Yes, the link is in the show description. However, whenever you are listening or watching this, so go check that out and get Dr. Kappa's book as well. And I think check out the HMI College if all of this just turned you on big time.
You can do free classes. Check it out for yourself. See how you align with it.
And definitely follow Desi. And, you're just so brilliant. And this is so much fun. It was so much fun.
Time just flew.
Yeah. Well, with that, I want to thank you all for joining. Again, do please check out my website, TriciaCarrCharm.com. Go to Mystic Arts Academy under the Work With Me section of my website so that you can come to my Multidimensional Spirit Guides series of classes. We're having those in a couple of weeks from now and the next couple of months, as well as my Mediumship and Intuitive Development class and many, many other classes on demand and live and local. And I will see you all next week. Thanks for tuning in. I love you, whoever you are.